And we've got 8 people coming in.
Okay, you're good to go. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and get things started then. Welcome, council members. Is Council Member Barker joining us tonight? Do we know? Bill, anybody heard from Councilman Barker?
I thought he was planning on it.
I talked to him.
Is that you, Councilmember Stoker?
Yes, I talked to him last night and he said he was, so.
Okay, well, we'll just wait. He can join us at his leisure. So welcome, council members, and Katie, Gerard, our city recorder, and John and other staff members tonight, and the public. Grateful that you could join us. So we'll go ahead and get started this evening. I understand that Julie Anderson and Council Member Stoker are going to handle our Pledge of Allegiance and thought tonight. Is that correct, Council Member Stoker?
Yes,
So which one are you doing?
the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, Katie and John, is Julie with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, Julie, why don't you start us off with a great thought tonight?
Oh, I was just going to do a prayer if that's okay.
That's all right. That's a good thought too.
Okay, that's kind of the way I'm going tonight. So, all right,
good.
thank you, Mayor. Our dear and gracious Heavenly Father, we are indeed grateful for this beautiful day that we've had and for the opportunity we have to be a part of this great city. We're grateful for all of the blessings that we receive each and every day. And we're especially grateful for the joy that we find as we live here in North Ogden. We are grateful for the friendships and the relationships that are built in each and every day. As we go into this city council, Heavenly Father, we would ask that Thou would inspire the minds of those from the public who are speaking and also from our city council, that together we will be able to continue to grow this city and to make it a great city and to be able to bring to fruition the things that will keep this city with the balance that it needs. We would ask that Thou will be mindful that we will be considerate of each other, that we will honor and respect those thoughts that are shared this night. Please be with the city council members as they make their decisions tonight, that they will do so with clarity of mind and with the peace knowing that they have made the correct choices. We're indeed grateful for the many blessings we receive each and every day and do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Julie. We'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance by Council Member Stoker and John and Katie, if you'd put up the flag.
Okay. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Council Member Stoker. We appreciate that. We'll now enter into our agenda. I'll read the repetitive statement that's required by law. And this is regarding not having an anchor location because of COVID. So pursuant to Utah Code Section 59-2-407, the mayor of North Ogden City hereby determines that conducting an electronic meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the November 8, 2020 declaration by the governor of the state of Utah regarding the increase in COVID-19 cases and the need for caution in people meeting together. The February 9th, 2021 meeting of the North Ogden City will be held electronically and will not have a physical location. All attendees will connect remotely, and links for public participation are available on the North Ogden City website. And I would add on several other sites, I think it's being broadcast live on Facebook, I believe, also. hopefully with the vaccinations and the decrease in the number of cases, we'll once again be able to meet in person. I know we're all anxious to do that. Also, I would ask if there are any conflicts of interest that need to be disclosed this evening in regards to any items on the agenda. Seeing none from the council, we'll now move into public comments. Katie and John, if you would let us know if anyone raises their hand or we get any messages from chat so that we can let the public speak this evening.
We do not have any comments at this time.
Okay, we always like to wait just a minute in case people are having difficulty getting off mute or raising their hand.
Okay.
Still none, Katie?
Still none.
All right, we'll move into our agenda this evening. Item number 4 on our agenda is a discussion and action on the sewer annual report. Our presenter will be Trent Wilkins, who is our sanitary sewer supervisor. So Trent, are you with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so this annual report is due every year. Goes to the state. It goes over questions, talks about how many backups, and we had none last year, which I'm proud of, and we all should be. It talks about how many homes got built, and according from what I found out from Joey, she told me 152 single-family homes, and we had 17 multi-unit buildings being built. Talks about the overall how our system is. I can't think of the word. The health of our system, yeah. And as I put in a report, if you've all read it, our system is in very good shape. We clean the city, a third of it every year. We have been doing ultralining, cured in place pipe for at least 10 years. Before I was a supervisor, we continue to do that. It cuts down on infiltration and broken pipes. It fixes broken pipes without digging the road up. I think I put in there, we started spraying the manhole vaults, because once we started lining the lines, the concrete lines, those gases will start eating the concrete vaults. So we're just protecting our system that way. There's financial questions in here as well. Evan filled that out. So you'd have to ask him if you have any questions about that. The purpose of doing this, like I said, it goes to the state. They look over it, make sure everybody's in compliance and everybody's on the same page doing what we should be. And knock on wood, we've never been audited for it, so I feel we're doing a good job. Well, that's it in a nutshell.
All right, let me ask the council if they have any questions. You know, this may be your opportunity to talk about some of the crap that's going on in the city, so to speak.
You mean the crap that's leaving the city?
Oh, good point, but it originates in the city, so. All right, any questions of Trent? And Trent, thank you for getting that report done and all you do for the city.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Very important to keep things flowing, so to speak. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any questions?
Mayor, I don't have a question, but I'd sure, with my assignment working with the Public Works, I've gotten to know Trent a little bit better. He's a stud. So thanks for what you're doing, Trent. Appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
All right. What we need to do is accept the report. So I would be looking for a motion from the council to accept the report as presented. Do I have a motion?
I move that we accept this report as presented by Trent at Public Works Department.
Okay, we do have a motion by member Severing. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, I have a second by Councilman Barker. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, then we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Severing,
Yes.
Councilman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilmember Stoker, and Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes unanimously. We'll now go on to item number 5 on our agenda, which is a discussion on the stormwater management plan. And we're fortunate enough to have Dave Espinosa, our Director of Public Works, with us this evening, who will make that presentation. So, David?
Hey, good night or good evening, council. How's everybody doing? A few of the council members were on the council the last time that we brought this to the council. It was back in 2016. We had just finished our audit, our stormwater audit, and we updated it then. This is a pretty big document that the state likes us to keep updated on a normal basis. And so what we're doing is just bringing it back to you guys. The purpose of this document is to enforce a plan that reduces the pollution to our stormwater system that eventually goes into our creeks, channels, reservoirs. And so as you guys could see, this is a very big document. It includes the enforcements of how we enforce, contractors, ourselves, our citizens in our city. It also includes the SWIP requirements that we have, which have grown just in the 5 years that since we've changed this plan, have grown, a ton. We used to have just SWIP regulations on a subdivision. In the last 2 years, we've actually moved to single lot SWIP. And in that same 5 years, we've actually hired a employee that just does SWIP requirements. He goes and makes sure that all of our contractors being compliant, as well as the home builders on every single lot that's in our city, which is a very big job. And Casey does a very good job at what he does. The plan also includes all of our stormwater maps, where our stormwater system originates, what basins it goes to, from those basins down to our big regional basins, and how it leaves our city. So that's our mapping system. That was one of the big updates that we had. Another big update that we had was the SOPs. 5 years ago, when we did the audit, they were really pushing to make the county be more cohesive and work together in everything that we do, which has been great. Like, we have a very good relationship, not just with our neighboring cities, but cities all the way downstream where we would send stormwater. And so it's been really great. But the new SOPs, they wanted us to update and actually make them more fit just North Ogden City. So Crystal did a wonderful job updating all of our SOPs to fit just our city. So that was another big portion of this that we updated and changed. There's also some public information and education in there on how to report if you see a illicit discharge, if you see somebody dumping something into the storm drains. We have all that on our stormwater management plan, and our stormwater management plan is uploaded now onto our website. And so, I would like, more citizens to go and check some of those things out so that they do know, who to contact or how to contact people if they ever see anybody dumping anything down our storm drains or anything like that. And then last, I think the biggest change was implementing the LID into the stormwater management plan. And back in 2016, the LID was just, and that's the low impact development. That was just something that we were talking about at the time. We have now implemented it into our city. And so in every development review, we work with these developers to help us try to put as much storm drain or stormwater back into the subdivision and back into the ground the right way, without sending it all down, down to other cities. And so, Lauren has done a wonderful job with helping us create this LID in our city, and we do a great job, implementing that. So the biggest thing is I just really like to thank, Dave Smith, Casey Matui, Crystal has been huge in helping us put this new plan together, and Lauren as well. So that's everything kind of in a quick summary. If you got any questions for me.
Any questions, council, with Dave? Dave, once again, I know that's probably not your team's favorite thing to put together reports and things, but it's essential to the city. So please thank your team for the great work. Is there anything particular you'd like to point out to the council that you need help with or anything, Dave, in regards to this?
No, sir. I think we have a good plan in place, and I really do. I think we did a great job updating it this time. And the one thing that we did notice is that stormwater is changing rapidly now. It used to be that, we weren't seeing some of the dramatic changes that we are today, but yeah. So this is, you might be able to see, or you might be seeing us a lot sooner than just the 5 years. It might be either every year or every other year, because there's so many changes coming from the EPA and from the state as far as stormwater and stormwater protection. So, this is something you'll probably see a lot more often.
Okay. All right, any questions, council, before we seek a motion?
I just had a quick one. Dave, as you see the construction going on, do you feel like our developers are doing a good job of following the regulations and not giving you hassles that are going to come back to bite you later?
Yeah, I actually do. I think for the most part that we have great developers in the city, and that they work really good with Casey. I think that if Casey points out something to them as far as a SWIP regulation, or if Justin sees something as far as, an inspection, I think they're very quick to get it fixed and get back in compliant with the city. I think at one time, we were seeing a lot of problems with people tracking mud down the street and those kind of things off these developments. And I think Casey's done a really good job of making sure that everything's set in place before they get rolling, that all of their paperwork's in place before we ever let them put a shovel in the ground and those kind of things. So yeah, I think we're really lucky that way, that Casey's kind of right on top of that.
And David, I think that's a very important question, because as you and I have had some discussions along with John, we're now dealing with some past things where we probably weren't as particular on inspections, but now we're having to fix those. So we rely heavily on you and your team to make sure that things are in compliance and that we don't end up having to go back years later and make any corrections. So Please let
Absolutely.
me know how much we rely on them. And
I definitely will.
we appreciate it.
Thanks,
Are
Mayor.
there- Thank you. Are there any more questions for Dave before we seek a motion? Seeing none, I would seek a motion then to approve the water management plan as presented by Dave. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move that we approve the stormwater management plan as presented by Dave Espinoza.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ekstrom, do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Stoker. Any further discussion that's come to your mind? Seeing none, we'll also do a roll call vote on this. Councilmember Stoker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 7 on our agenda this evening, which is a discussion that'll be presented by John Call, our city manager and attorney. And he's going to talk to us about the intersection at 2600 North and 1050 East, as we have had some inquiries by citizens regarding its safety. So, John?
Oh, thanks, Mayor. We have Lauren on with us. Okay. Oh, sorry, just one sec. And Lauren will do some screen sharing. I think we've got these 2 road projects to talk about, and we can take them in either order. Do you want to talk about Pleasant View Drive first, Mayor?
Yeah, because I skipped that one, so that's a good point, John. Thank you.
So
that's a nice way to tell me that I messed up. So I appreciate your compassion and understanding there. So yes, we will talk about item 6, which is our discussion on Pleasant View Drive and related changes there. So thank you, John.
Yeah, so council, we have talked about this before. This is the idea of the 2 options that basically the council wanted brought back to them is, if it's left open, what approach would the council like, or what recommendation would Lauren have, who is our city engineer? And then the second option is, if we close it, what is the recommendation for that? And I know that Tiffany is on the line as well for that as well, if we get to that point. But I think that in the interest of taking these a kind of a bite at a time, I think it'd be helpful for the council to talk about, is leaving it open an option that the council wants to consider seriously, or is closing it an option that the council wants to consider seriously? Because I think that's kind of the gateway question before the council really focuses on what it would look like in either of those situations. And so is that a good approach, or would the council like to start with what would it look like, so then you can make the decision about whether you'd like to close it or leave it open? I know that seems kind of circular, but I just want to take it in the most time efficient manner so the council has time to discuss it, or discuss the option that that you're considering.
Let me poll the council, see what their likings are. Would you, let's start with Councilmember Swanson. Do you want to focus on closure, or do you want to look at both options?
Focus on closure.
Okay, we have a focus on closure. Councilmember Barker?
I'd like to see both options, but
Okay, Councilmember Stoker?
I think I'd like to see both options also.
Okay, Councilmember Severing.
I would like to see both options as well.
Well, that is the majority, but Councilmember Ekstrom, what's your liking?
I'm definitely leaning towards closure, just because I have been through that intersection enough times that it really worries me. But I'm open to see both.
Okay, and if this were the US Senate needed tie-breaking vote, which it's not, I would lean towards closure also. But let's go ahead and see both presentations, John.
Okay, so Lauren, we've got you here on with us. Are you currently able to share your screen?
It shows that it's been disabled, so.
Okay, how about now?
Okay. Let's see.
And Council, Lauren's put together a program that kind of shows this is the overall image, and here's the components we can add, but it's kind of it's like those felt boards, if you know what those are, where you just start adding little pieces, or like a Mr. Potato Head, right? So we can add these little pieces and talk about what they mean, and either add all of them or some of them. But is it letting you share it yet, Lauren?
Mayor.
Yes, Councilman.
Yes, I'm sharing.
Perfect.
Councilmember Swanson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just a quick question for John. John, is excuse me, in our packet, it appears that there is only a single page dealing with this. Is that correct?
That's correct. So because
Okay.
of the way this model is built, it's hard to show all the variants without giving
Sure.
you 5,000 pages.
Just wanted to make sure that there wasn't missing pages from our 501 page packet.
All right. Is it my turn, John?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. This is the intersection that we're talking about, which is 2650 and Washington right there. Let me just show you a few things. And this is all available on Google Earth that I've put together. So here's the existing park property. Shows roughly the limits of that. I've included also, we've talked about expanding the parking that's in purple here for the adjacent commercial property. One of the proposals for closing the road would be, let's say, if we put a temporary barrier at this location, that would close off the road and allow for the commercial development to access via 300 East. Part of that closure, that would be a temporary initial closure. Then later we could actually take the property and remove the asphalt and make this additional parkland and close it off at this location. What that does is that allows the commercial development and our old public works site still to access via Pleasant View Drive, but it would not be have access onto Washington at all. That allows possibly a driveway in this location for the new parking stalls that could connect into these existing parking lots. Another option or add-on could be actually putting in, and this is this teal colored blue, add another driveway out onto Washington that would allow them to have some access into this lower development via Washington, but it would require removal of a few of the parking stalls in this location. So that is one of the options we have for closure, and probably is the least impact to everyone. Any questions or concerns about that at this time?
Lauren, have you presented this to Dr. Paul? I mean, does he have a preference on what is done there?
I have not. I would put that question to John.
So I have sent him a few examples of these pictures. I thought he was planning on being on the call tonight, but I don't see him here. But if he is here, he could raise his hand and maybe provide some feedback at the end of the presentation. Like I mentioned, we also have Tiffany here who can provide some comment from a park perspective, if the council would like that as well.
And Council Member Ekstrom, I think this option on the screen is kind of what, if I understood right, they preferred versus total closure and just an exit off of, an entrance off of Washington. That's my recollection in the previous discussion, that this is kind of what he felt was the best for them.
That's what I was remembering too. I was just checking to make sure. I'm glad thank you for verifying that with me, because sometimes I'm like, oh, was that the one he liked?
One of the other options that's available for us is I put this temporary berm or barrier right at Washington, but in the long term, we could actually install curb and gutter along here to close that off completely and remove the barrier. And that could easily be accomplished with our road widening project.
Okay, any further questions, council?
Mayor,
Yes, Council Member Severing.
I'm trying to remember our discussion. What was, did we contact, has John or Lauren contacted Pleasant View? I mean, I know this is in North Ogden's purview, but what is Pleasant View said about this idea?
Well, John and myself will be meeting with Mayor Call tomorrow at noon. In initial discussions with Mayor Call, he was in favor of the closure because of the danger of the intersection. But we can gather further information tomorrow.
Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Swanson.
In our last discussion, we had also talked about it was just an idea thrown out that if we used this model that we have here, that one of the ideas that I threw out was that we would consider exchanging the land rather than purchasing the land in the purple triangle, that it would be in exchange for the loss of access. And that seemed to be what Dr. Paul made him most interested in this particular thing, was that he still maintained some access, not perfect without the driveway going on to Washington, but then they wouldn't have to purchase that land.
Phil, I've actually added that on, and you'll see this yellow here. That's showing a possible land swap exchange that could occur and expand the park in that location.
So that would probably be our discussion, Councilmember Swanson, is would it be a land swap to extend the park over closer in exchange for where the purple is?
I'd be okay either way.
Yeah, we'll continue to talk with the owners there once we make a decision which route we want to take. We'll surely be fair and equitable with what we do. Is that you, John?
Yeah, sorry, Dr. Paul was watching on YouTube, so he should be jumping in here in just a minute, and so the council will be able to ask him questions.
Okay. While we're waiting, why don't we look at the other alternative in the
All right, I will turn off these items and show you the other alternative. So we still have the parkland right here. Let me find. One thing about that intersection, the turning movements off of Pleasant View Drive onto 400 East, especially the left-hand turns going up the hill, are quite dangerous. So what I proposed is a partial closure, which eliminates left turns and also eliminates the through movements whether with median or with signage. And here, I've added the median right here. I'll just zoom in here a bit. So this median would allow right turns onto Washington, right turns off of Washington onto 2650, but trying to eliminate the through movements. And we would put some signage here eliminating the through movement coming in this direction. But it still would allow the business to have access in and out of their property at this location. There's always the other addition to add this other driveway up at here so people can come in and out onto Washington from that location. But if we were to keep it partially open, I would recommend that we eliminate those left turn and through movements the best we can, whether it's a raised median or a striped median. That could easily be installed and wouldn't cost a whole lot to do. So those are the couple options, one total closure and one partial closure with restricted movements.
Well, I've had discussion with Lauren about this, and one thing, it still does not prohibit what I think is dangerous is people coming along Pleasant View Drive, taking that right while people are trying to get out of the entrance and to McDonald's and Lee's there.
Yes, down here.
That is still, in my opinion, dangerous as they come around that corner with people trying to get out on the road, even though they're taking a right-hand turn.
Yeah, and that's another reason for, a complete closure and to eliminate that movement. That would sure improve that safety issue.
I believe as we look at this, that one of the side things would be maybe park expansion of Bicentennial Park. But the primary reason I'd like us to look at this is the safety of that intersection. And we surely want to minimize the effect on the business there. I'll go back to John and myself standing there. I just don't think you get a lot of drive-by business for a dentist, particularly, but I don't operate the business. But we do want to come up with a solution, I think, that's less impactful. I believe one of the other options we didn't present tonight was even a closure further back, but we felt that would impact the business too greatly. So any questions on Lauren's presentation this evening?
Mayor, I just wanted to let you know that Dr. Paul is online at this point. So let me
Okay,
give
we'll
him-
ask him in a few minutes if he'd like to make comments.
Okay,
Let's see if we have some additional comments from the council or questions that maybe Dr. Paul could answer when he joins us. Any questions, council? Or which way you're leaning, maybe? I guess we ought to ask that
Mayor,
question first. Councilman Severing, is that you? Did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, just one quick question of Lauren. So Lauren, on that driveway, would that driveway be only a right turn as well?
Oh, that driveway, the teal colored, could be
Right.
both in and out.
Which is, and this is Dr. Paul, which is one of our concerns is that you're just moving the
Dr.
truck.
Paul, Dr. Paul, could you wait till
Oh,
we'll
perfect.
call on
Yep,
you in a minute, please?
perfect.
Well, I can tell you, I had the same concern as I think Dr. Paul is going to mention. I mean, if we're shutting down a left-hand turn on 2650, and then within maybe a couple of 100 feet, we're allowing a left and a right. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I know that we're trying to eliminate traffic going across 400, but I think there's just as much concern for somebody trying a left hand at that teal driveway as on 2650. So to me, it doesn't.
We will have that issue on all of the driveways going up Washington. So it's not just out of this business, but all the other businesses and each of the residentials will still have that concern. We will not have Pleasant View Drive with the increased traffic making those left turns though. But it could easily go with a one-way, right in, right out only as an option too. But it was to provide another way that people from Washington Boulevard could access that parking lot and that business.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing, for your question. I think that Lauren's point is the difference in traffic coming off of Pleasant View versus out that driveway would be substantially different, but it still does pose some danger. Councilmember Swanson, I saw you unmuted. Did you have a comment?
I just a short one. When we looked at this last time, I came to the same conclusion I'm coming to this time, and that is a full closure with the curb and gutter. Working out with Dr. Paul the land swap so that they have the additional parking area that would allow access from the top parking lot to the bottom parking lot, and perhaps a driveway that goes over by the old public works. And that eliminates any chance of through traffic, left-hand turns, any kind of dangerous traffic that we're experiencing now at that intersection. And my opinion hasn't changed. That's it right there.
Thank you. Councilmember Stoker, do you have a comment?
Just looking at what's been presented, it does, for safety reasons, it makes a lot of sense to do it that way than just to put a medium and the teal driveway. That just will add to the confusion and the mess on Washington.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ekstrom?
Yeah, I think the driveway or not is a question for Dr. Paul. He knows his clientele, and and also it's the dentist office down below. I mean, maybe it's just better to say the dentist office traffic needs to come off Pleasant View Drive and go that way, and then we just don't, and that's the entrance. In which case the animal hospital is the one up above. But we've got the same issue. It's just the two driveways right there close together. Yeah, I'm much more leaning toward the closure. Just trying to minimize the number of driveways coming out onto 400 East, I think is a good idea.
So this would be your preference if I'm hearing you correctly? Okay, Councilmember Barker, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, my concern, and it deals with safety. If we close this road on Pleasant View Drive and push everyone down 300 East, how soon before we can get a traffic light? Otherwise, I think all we're doing is moving one problem intersection to another problem intersection. And in my opinion, 2700 North is a lot more dangerous than Washington, because you will have 4 lanes or 2 lanes of traffic each direction doing 55 miles an hour. Here, it's only 30 miles an hour. So if we don't get that traffic light, or if we have to wait for a study to be done, are we asking for more problems?
I think you've got a good
traffic
point.
light planned there? I think there is already.
They have committed based upon traffic flow, which we believe with traffic going down 300 would do that, but it surely could be conditional on the road closure of getting the light, because we don't want to create more problems. But that being the case, Councilman Barker, are you leaning towards closure?
I'm okay with closure as long as we're getting a light. If we're not getting the light, I don't want that. I don't think we should close that road. I think one should lean on the other, because like I said, we're just moving one dangerous intersection to an even more dangerous one.
Well, and I believe we need a light there. We've already had some accidents with people trying to get out of the plaza there to go left on 2700. So we could surely consider that as part of the proposal for closure, is to get with UDOT and see if we.
Well, and remember too, that the speed limit on 2700 doesn't hit 55 until about 100 feet after or west of 300 East.
But
Up
it's still
until that point.
45 then.
No, it's 40.
It's 40.
Well, maybe I just drive 45 then.
Well,
report
you and
that.
you and a whole lot of other people, but it's
Right.
like the folks coming down Washington there at 27 at 2650. They're not doing 30.
No.
Yeah.
Not by any stretch of the imagination.
We'll let the chief know about your speeding habit there, Councilmember Barker.
Watch for the big red truck.
All right, so if I hear things correctly, we'd be looking for a leaning towards closure. With this, the preference here, knowing that we've got to work on getting that light on 2700. Any other questions before we let Dr. Paul express his feelings on this and maybe some suggestions?
I'd also like to hear from Tiffany as far as changing it into a park also. And either one can speak first.
Let's go to Dr. Paul, because I think, you know, the extension of the park there on a land swap is kind of optional, doesn't have to take place, but would be nice to do. But let's go to Dr. Paul first to see what he's got to say.
Thank you all for working so hard on this. Going back to the little teal driveway, I think it's too narrow. You're just going to try and enforce traffic. You're going to lose some parking spots there. And all we've done is move the problem from the south Pleasant View Drive up north to Dr. Simpkins' clients. I don't think that's a good option that way. I think it's better in what you're talking about of, you know, making access to the west of the current parking lots. So that was our thought. And Dr. Shoup's question was, with a private drive like that, is that a concern from UDOT being too close to the other intersections? He wasn't sure, but those are a couple of the things that he wanted to bring up for today. I don't know if I explained myself very well on that. Is that teal driveway too close to the intersection for UDOT to give approval?
No. And we don't, Lauren may have the answer to that, Dr. Paul, but I agreed with you. I agree with you. Moving that up is just kind of creating a little problem further up the road.
Yeah, and UDOT will not have any input on that driveway. It's all city roads.
Okay.
Not state roads, but it is awful close.
I think so. I think we see that problem coming up 2600 with all the entrances into the plaza there to the south of 2600. You know, we've got about 3 entrances there, and you see the effect that has on traffic. So I agree that if we can accommodate without putting the driveway in would be the best solution. So Dr. Paul, are you all right with this solution? We worked together to see about Councilman Swanson's idea of a potential land swap there.
I think it's going to be probably the best approach. One question is, you know, with the cell tower, they have that cement pad that it's kind of mid. Do they need all that? Because there really wouldn't be enough room to come into that top parking lot if it's as drawn. It's almost, and it looks like they've taken off their equipment. There's just a catwalk and a cement pad that it doesn't look like they're using. So I don't know if within this, if that can be extended just a little bit. So particularly when there's going to be an expansion of Washington, historically, we've not had great access into the upper parking lot, and that's really had a negative impact on business. And so, yeah, if we could make that to where it's a realistic, you know, ability to come off of that upper and down into the lower, then that would be very helpful.
Okay. Any other suggestions? That's a good suggestion.
No, I think that's going to accomplish many of the purposes that, you know, that's good for the region. The safety is super important to us. You know, it gets us the opportunity to get some additional parking, gets the park to have a little bit more access or wiggle room for the park. I think this is probably the best of the approaches that we've looked at.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your input and willingness to work with us. We surely want to make things as safe as we can for all of our citizens. So, do you have any other comments, Dr. Paul?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Tiffany, it sounds like this option with the park extension there, Councilmember Ekstrom would like to know if you have anything you'd like to add.
Just a little bit. That last option that was shown there with the extension to the park is the best option for the park, because the most used portion of the park is on that east side. And so by closing the road, by closing Pleasant View Drive at Washington right there, it does make it so that it's a better benefit to the park than it would be by leaving that road open.
And council, I think this gives us some motivation to enhance the park as we get the funds to do so. I think the park does need some work and kind of some regeneration there. Anything else, Tiffany?
No, not at this time.
Okay, well, once again, we're going to wish you good luck with the big event coming up, hopefully in the next couple of days.
Thank you very much.
And don't worry about this. Well, you have much more to worry about. So
never worried.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Any other comments, council? It sounds like to me. And John, I don't think this was just for discussion this evening. Do we need any further action or discussion?
No, because what we'll do now is we'll have Lauren and Tiffany work with, or it'll probably be Lauren and Jesse working on getting some better plans and some cost estimates. Because the next idea would be talking about budgeting and how we approach it from that perspective. And just one final comment, Rob Scott pointed out that closing this road down does bring this area into compliance with our general plan as far as approaching this intersection in a safer way and continuity for plazas and things like that. So just so you're aware as well.
Yeah, thank you, John. It seems like, unless I misunderstood, the council would be leaning towards closure. Councilman Barker made a good point. We should start working with UDOT on a light, see what we can do there, let them know of the change. And probably initially just that temporary closure to get people used to it, going down 300 also. And then as we look at our budget and where funds might come from, we can then take step 2, which would be maybe an extension of the park. But seems like it might be worthwhile to do it in phases and put that temporary barriers up there. And then as the road work's taking place, as Councilman Swanson indicated, just put the curb and gutter in there as phase 2, and then phase 3 would be look at the park extension. So did I misunderstand anything there, council? All right, John, anything else you need from us to move along those lines?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
All right.
Quick addition to the consideration, if we're going to put the park in, if we're going to need some additional parking for the park, if we make the park bigger. So that's just something to kind of put in with the plans for expanding the park.
And we have had a discussion about that, how we could use the old public safety building there and some of the frontage along there to provide additional parking. So we have had that a little bit of that discussion, but still we've got a safety issue because people will be coming down that road. So we'll have to make sure we have a safe way for them to cross the street. All right, I've been so focused on lucky number 7, I guess we can move on to that, which will be our discussion on the intersection at 2600 and 1050. So can we go there now, John?
Yeah, so that's what's shown on the screen ahead of us. The council received some comments. We had a recent accident at this intersection. And so the council wanted to talk about the safety of this one. We thought since Lauren was on the phone call for Pleasant View, that this would be a good time to talk about this one as well. Lauren has put together some drawings on this. I believe the chief is also listening, Chief Quinney, to talk about some of the safety aspects, but this just shows some of the ideas related to what's the best approach to this intersection. Should it be a four-way stop? Should it be a regulated intersection with actual lights? Should it be a roundabout? And so, Lauren, it probably works best if you kind of lead the council through this, since really there's some engineering perspectives, but then also, you know, Chief is here to answer some questions about the safety, you know, of this area.
All right. I'm going to share my screen. And we'll go back to the Google Earth program again. I've got some other exhibits to show you here. This is the intersection of 2600 and 1050. And I'm going to show you a couple of the corners. These are our site triangles at the northwest and southwest corner based on our current ordinance. Those are the 40-foot triangles. And those are the areas that are supposed to be kept clean of any visual items that are greater than 2 feet or really between 2 and 7 feet. We need a visual clarity across there. On this corner right here, the northeast corner, we have hedges that go in this area and a bunch of trees. And those hedges are actually about 3 feet tall. And these trees definitely are larger than that. And so based on our current ordinance, this is not compliant. And that's where we have visibility issues of people coming down to this intersection and trying to see down 2600. On the opposite corner, this is property owned by the city. We have trees in that area, and we have a very similar view restriction. Now, a couple items, the side triangles on the 40-foot, I have done some studies and proposed changing that 40-foot site triangle to actually 2 30 by 100-foot site triangles. I'm going to show you an overlay on that. So let me get, all right. So here's one of the site triangles on one leg. Here's the other site triangle on the other leg. And so based on this, the red ones are actually at the property line, where the white are along the curb line where the traveling car will be. And as you see, we've got area on beyond the white triangles under our 40-foot site triangle that's really, it doesn't have any effect really on our visibility. Really, these white areas are the ones that are affected. And I'll turn the rest of them on for this intersection. So we have them on each of the corners, and they look in that fashion. Those would be what I would recommend, changing our 40-foot triangle to actually reflect this 30 by 100 foot. And every street is a little different. It's not exactly 30, it's not exactly 100, but I looked at a lot of different options, and that's sort of a good range that covers the majority of the area that needs to have good visibility. So we definitely have some safety issues on these two corners, and they could easily be corrected by clearing up some of the vegetation and cutting it back. So let's take off some of these. I think in your packet, you also had a copy of a roundabout. Was that correct? The roundabout example was for a place out in Syracuse, a very similar road, but it installed a roundabout. Now that requires a little more right-of-way than a standard intersection. And I'm just going to show you a few things. John had that other exhibit up, and I've sort of put that into this set of plans that shows this is the right-of-way that we would need if we were to do a roundabout in this area. And then the roundabout would go right in this area. But we have some additional right-of-way along 1050, this north section that connects to the park that would need to finish off that intersection. And it's a little narrower to the east on 2600 that we would have to acquire some right-of-way across the northern property. And then each one of these corner cuts would take additional right-of-way if we were to do a roundabout. I think those are sort of some items for some discussions and comments from the council.
Okay, let me seek some comments from the council with their thoughts. Let's start with Council Member Stoker, see if she's very familiar with that intersection, I know, in not a real positive way, but go ahead, Cheryl.
I find the roundabout interesting, but I wonder, does that add some confusion till people get used to it? Sometimes roundabouts are a little confusing and a little intimidating. I did like the idea of more of a sight triangle and clearing up some of that vegetation because you really can't see and cars pull out way, way far. I don't know that a four-way stop would work. I think that would, people run stop signs all the time. So, I'm just open up to the discussion, just listening and seeing what everybody else says and thinking it through.
Okay, thank you. Council Member Ekstrom, would you like to share some thoughts with us this evening?
I too am intimately familiar with this intersection. I drive it actually a couple times a day, and it's a nightmare. I think at a minimum, I really like Lauren's idea of the adjusted sight triangles. I think that would help. But I think the roundabout really is the safest way to go through that intersection, just especially considering how I see people drive it. There's ideal and then there's reality, right? And I think Cheryl was alluding to that too. She's like, people do all sorts of crazy stuff. They cut the corner turning left, traveling east and then turning north onto 1050. They, will cut that corner really close, going right into the turning lane. But this one is going to be costly. Putting in a roundabout is going to, that's going to, yeah. Do we, and Lauren, I really would love to get some numbers on this about how much that's going to cost, because I think that's really where we're going to end up.
Roundabouts are costly, not only additional right-of-way, but just the physical cost of those improvements. We also have the creek that runs from northeast to southwest through here, through the trees, down through this area. And that culvert would have to be extended to handle the roundabout. So that's an additional cost, but usually a signal runs roughly $100,000. A roundabout will probably be more expensive than that, 150, 200,000. But then you have some right-of-way that you have to acquire in addition to that. So,
yeah, I think we've got to do something soon. I don't know how many accidents have been there. I've been hit. I've not actually been hit. I've been close to being hit several times, trying to get through there. And I know Reston Monson's, I think, daughter, he's my neighbor that just lives up the street here, did get hit. There's a cost in, there are additional costs we have to think of it besides just the cost of, I think the safest option is just the way to go. So this is my vote. I vote for the roundabout. And then we've just got to see if we can afford it. So that's my position.
Okay. Councilmember Swanson, your comments?
Yeah, I have several. Lauren, on the site triangles going to a 30 roughly by 100, are you talking about an ordinance change and making that the standard in the city as a whole, or just at this intersection?
I would recommend it be citywide.
Okay.
And that on any of the state roads that we comply with the UDOT's requirement for site triangle.
Okay.
But this would be on all of our local and collector roads across the city.
Okay, great. The next question kind of piggybacks on comments that council members Stoker and Ekstrom have made, but how are these site triangles going to get impatient drivers to actually come to a stop at the stop sign and actually look for traffic before they dart out into the intersection, or sit behind the stop line and wait because it's rush hour traffic and there's a lot of people coming home that are coming east on 2600 and turning left to go north on 1050. How is any of this going to change that driving behavior?
Site triangles only will make it visually improved. It won't stop habits.
Right.
Just like if we were to install 4 stop signs, you're going to have a lot of people run stop signs just because they think it's safe and they can do it.
Right.
But changing the site triangle is not going to change that. It's just going to now give us some teeth so we can ensure that things are not planted or constructed in those areas based on what is real life out there. So.
And then my final is not a question, but a comment, but I really like the idea of a 4-way stop, at least at this point. It's an inexpensive way to go. Yes, I think there will be far fewer people if you've got a 4-way stop that, run the stop sign at full speed. That way we rarely have anybody coming full speed through that intersection, east to west or west to east, and then somebody north and south trying to dart in front of them or turn left in front of them. Pretty inexpensive way to change that intersection and then improve those site triangles and see what that does.
One thing, Phil, about the 4-way stops, they have to meet certain warrants, and a warrant study would have to be conducted on this intersection to see if they were warranted. And the chief could probably speak to that. He's real familiar with those issues. So,
is that the same with a roundabout, which is effectively a moving 4-way stop?
Roundabout, it is really an alternative to a traffic signal.
Okay.
And so if a traffic signal is warranted, a roundabout can take the place of a traffic signal and allow for continuous flow of that intersection.
So whether 4-way stop, signalized, or roundabout, we have to do a warrant study.
There should be a warrant to see if changes need to happen. The same thing would apply if we wanted to remove that stop sign, which we wouldn't, but those kinds of warrants would have to be evaluated and checked.
Perhaps then the next step is to do that study and find out where we sit.
You know, Phil, in your comment, and I know the chief's with us, I believe that the best way to get compliance is with enforcement. And we have some other issues along 2600 that the chief is looking at. But maybe wrapping up enforcement, getting the corner site to the 30 by 100 would be worth considering why we get the warrant study done. Just a thought there. Councilman Barker, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, until we can adopt the ordinance for 30 by 100, doing the 40-foot site triangle would be easy, at least on the Barker Park side. Go in there, clean it up, and I'd clear that up. The issue I have is we're talking about this intersection, but there's multiple dangerous intersections in our city because people don't stop. So we'll come down to Fruitland Drive and 2600 at the same time of day, and you'll stop and wait for that, and people are darting in and out trying to get across. It's just an issue that as we're growing, we're dealing with the intersections because people they're in a hurry. They like it when it was 20 years ago when they could make every turn they wanted, and now they have to wait. Enforcement's a good option, but I think people just need to take accountability and drive like it.
Enforcement
it's easier
helps
said than done.
Enforcement helps them take accountability, Councilman.
It does.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Councilmember Severing, anything you have to add?
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Barker. I actually think, this is just my opinion, it's because I come down 1050, I pass 3100, and then I hit 2600. In my opinion, 3100 and 1050 is a lot more dangerous than 2600 and 1050. I like the idea of enforcement. I think that is a good idea. I like what Councilman Swanson suggested with the four-way stop. I don't personally like the roundabout. If I'm looking at this correctly, Lauren, so that northeast quadrant, we're actually going to, if we were to pursue like a roundabout, we would actually have to take about what, 10 feet?
I don't think we've measured it exactly, but it looks like 10 to 12 feet. Yeah.
Because I know that one house, I know that house that's the if you're first turning northbound off 2600 on a 1050, I think if we took 10 feet of that guy's driveway, wow, we wouldn't leave him much there.
Yeah.
Not much at all.
That, if you look at that, it lines up exactly with the right-of-way that's across the frontage of the park.
Right,
the road just narrows down on that northbound lane right there.
I can see that. On there, but man, that would really cut down his driveway and put the house considerably close to the road. So anyhow, long story short, I'm in favor of a four-way stop first, and like Councilman Barker suggested, I think we very carefully clean up those corners. I'm okay with the adjusted site triangle, but I would rather see several of our intersections looked at as opposed to just setting aside the money for just one roundabout down at 1050 and 2600.
I think the point, this is part of the growth situation infrastructure we talk about, as Councilman Barker mentioned. Our roads aren't built to handle the kind of traffic that's occurring with the growth of the city, but we have to start somewhere. So if I could summarize and maybe make a proposal, is that what we do is we look at changing the ordinance as suggested, cleaning those corners up, asking the chief for additional enforcement, having a warrant study on the potential of a four-way stop, and then getting an estimate of cost to do a roundabout at some point in the future, but maybe taking this in phases. And first of all, starting with adjusting the ordinance and getting enforcement while we're waiting for the warrant study and the cost. Because I think you're right, Council Member Severing, we're getting more and more intersections that become more dangerous, and that's just part of the growth of the city, and we have to try to minimize risk as much as we can, but starting somewhere, is that all right, Council? If we go that route, we have Rob and Lauren work together on an ordinance changing it. Is it 30 by 100, Lauren?
Yes, 30 by 100 twice.
Yeah, to adjust that ordinance. And we have the chief with us, maybe just getting a comment from him to see if he sees any holes in that phased in approach. Chief, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple things. The biggest problem I see at this intersection is the road width of 2600 north. And large vehicles that are southbound on 1050 and want to make that right-hand turn. There's very little room for them to actually make that without entering the opposite lane of travel. And that I think is the biggest part. I don't think 2600 is meant to handle the amount of traffic that we have and the large vehicles that use it. We're going to definitely have, with the amount of traffic, accidents. And just going off the numbers, over the last 20 something years, it's not significant, the number of accidents. We've had them, that's for sure. And most of them can be contributed to recklessness. And yes, enforcement can probably curb that a little bit, and we'll definitely take a look at that. But I think the safest thing, and this is just my opinion, is the roundabout. Whether we do four-way stop or keep it the way it is and the sight triangle, that's not going to decrease the dangers from recklessness. And the amount of traffic as it continues to grow is just going to multiply that.
I agree, Chief, and I think we have to start somewhere while we're getting information on these other situations. And you're right, you can't legislate common sense, right?
Exactly.
So could you beef up enforcement a little bit there, and at least we could start with the sight triangles and see what that does for us?
Yeah, we do that.
And then could you look at it to see, just as an option, if the four-way stop would be warranted? And then Lauren can start getting some costs, but I think that's one of the things we need to start, not that we haven't, we need to continue to look at, is these intersections as traffic continues to increase. And unfortunately, contractors who are building don't have any obligation to participate in these intersections we have. So they're taking care of the immediate needs in their building, but this is part of the infrastructure that we've got to be aware of and know that we're going to be facing, and start figuring out how we're going to deal with that going forward, because it's just going to get worse. So can we proceed that way, Council? Any objections? Thanks, Lauren, for your good work. Thanks for your comment, Chief. And if there's no other suggestions, we'll move on our agenda. All right, let's go to item number 8, which is a discussion or action to consider an ordinance to rezone some property for land located at approximately 3575 north and 950 east from residential R110 and Hillside HP3 to Hillside HP2. Rob Scott, our planning director, will lead the discussion on that. So Rob? Katie and John, is Rob with
Mayor,
us?
just one second. I'm not there. I see him. Sorry about that.
Okay, Rob, can you hear us?
You can.
All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Katie, if we could go to page 461, which is attachment A. You'll see that map. Keep going down. The other way, I think. Oh, it's a different page number then. Keep going down. It's attachment A is what it's called. So you need to go the other direction.
Rob, just one.
Keep going. Whoop, there we go. Whoop, whoop, right there. So what this does is this shows the existing zoning map. The blue, if I remember right, is HP 2. And then the yellow is R110 and the pink is HP 3. So you can see how that this particular configuration is somewhat kind of goes hither and yon around various properties. So what this particular proposal would do would be to change the pink areas and that yellow area all to be in the blue. So it'd be HP2. So I think that really helps to figure out what's actually being requested with this agenda item. So this is a legislative decision. It is one that the council is the land use authority with respect to that. It does require the planning commission to give a recommendation, which they have. They conducted a public hearing on this matter. The applicant spoke, but there were no residents that spoke on this particular item. So the HP zones are a little different than the other residential zones in that they require specific studies to address the physical attributes of the land that is under consideration. So it has to do with slopes, geology, fault lines, vegetation, etc. There have been numerous studies in this general vicinity, and our city engineer has looked at those studies and found them to be adequate as part of, there's nothing that would preclude from a physical standpoint, the transfer of these two zones to the HB2 zone. In our general plan, we have some guidelines that help us to make a decision on whether or not a map amendment is appropriate or not. First of all, the general plan map calls for this area to be defined as residential hillside, and that's defined as areas with significant slopes and associated issues with proximity to the mountains where particular land use controls are necessary to assure appropriate development. The property is within the hillside neighborhood. So that reference is the one that I just shared with you relative to the previous studies that have been done in this, up in this location. So the general guidelines were reviewed by staff and also by the Planning Commission. And so if you want to go up to the staff report, we can take a quick look at those. There we go. So it's at the bottom of this next page. Here's where that analysis starts. So in terms of general guidelines, the first one is that a definite edge should be established between the types of uses to protect the integrity of each use. except where the mixing of uses is recommended in the general plan. In this case, it's not recommended, the mixing of uses. The parcels are in a variety of zones, and this rezone will consolidate these parcels into one zone designation. And that's important because one of the things that this rezone is a precursor to is a subdivision, and we want to have that entire subdivision to be in one zone designation. So zoning should reflect the existing use of property to the greatest extent possible is the next one, unless the area is in transition. And of course, these properties up there, they're vacant parcels and they're transitioning into residential. The next one is where possible, properties which face each other across local streets should be the same or similar zone. And by making this change, then that particular policy would be complied with as well. Next, zone boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments. I think I already referenced that one, but that would mean that all the lots within the subdivision would have the same zone. We have a couple more. Avoid isolating neighborhoods. And in this case, the proposed zone would not isolate the existing neighborhood. There's one, the next one is require excellence in design. The building permit will be processed for the future home and accessory buildings meeting city standards. No particular design standards go beyond what's in our basic ordinances. Then lastly, consider development agreement to assure higher quality development. No development agreement is proposed with this standard subdivision. So the summary of the land use considerations for you tonight is the proposal consistent with the general plan. Secondly, how does the proposal relate to the zoning and land use policy guidelines? The Planning Commission, after their public hearing, on a 6-0 vote with one abstention, recommends that the City Council approve the rezone from HP3 and R110 to HP2. The Planning Commission found that the application is consistent with the general plan and is also consistent with the draft general plan steering committee plan map. And with that, you also have a copy of the minutes. If there's any further questions from the council, I'd be happy to entertain them, Mayor.
Well, maybe just a little insight, and I know we have the applicant with us tonight. As I listened into the Planning Commission meeting, there were some suggestions that I think the applicant said he was fine with, just to inform what the long-term discussion is on regards roads and things of that nature. I would just say that I think the applicant was very reasonable in agreeing to what the Planning Commission recommended. So I know that doesn't necessarily have to do with the rezone itself, but I just wanted to point that out. But I think there was a reasonable solution from both the developer standpoint and the city.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with you. I concur with your comment.
All right. I'll write that down. You might be the first one that has, so I'll write that down in my journal tonight.
I'll be doing the same thing.
All right. Any questions for Rob? Before I don't know if the applicant wants to speak or anything. It doesn't appear like there's any resistance to the recommendation, but Eric, if you're with us, would you like to make any comments or before we proceed?
I'm okay. I mean, just as part of this, as you can see in line with the map, the idea would to continue that line up, hopefully in the future to this piece as well as to the cove. Going back, this ground as a history, we owned this ground before the HP zones were created, and it originally was platted as just our residential R110. Then the HP zones were created. That squiggly line, just for informational purposes, that goes through there in the angle is the old pressure zone. That was as high as the water pressure the city could serve on the hillside prior to the tanks being built up on the hillside. So that's why it has a weird, why the zoning had stopped at that location. And so now, and obviously continues up. So, it's just asked that we try and keep things in line. Also, there's a little sliver that you can see goes into a already approved subdivision that needs to go in compliance to the HP2 zone. So we love your support on this.
And just to mention too, as the council knows and the public may know, Eric is the chairperson of our planning commission, and he did abstain from the vote in this area. So that was the abstention. Any other questions from council?
Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Swanson.
I guess the question that I have is why not just rezone the R110 into HP3 and then that makes everything the same? Why bite off an HP2 with the intent to bite off another HP3 and make it HP2? I mean, eventually how far does that occur? Do we end up with all of HP3 becoming an HP2?
I think that's what I heard Eric say, that eventually he'd like to do that right up to the cove.
Right, but I'm talking about the entire HP3 zone. I mean, if we start changing this part of HP3 to HP2, and then later we do another piece that connects it up to the cove, what about everything to the east of that that's HP3? Does that also have we set a precedent that now upon request we change it to HP2?
Rob, you want to address Councilmember Swanson's question?
I think, that's a good comment. The reason that we felt that this was appropriate is that when you take in total the land area that is being considered along with that to the north, from a slope standpoint, from the other studies in that, there doesn't seem to be any justification for making those larger lots. HP3 requires a 2-acre lot.
Right.
The slopes in this area, the other geologic hazards and other kinds of things do not, in our opinion, would not necessarily require that those 2-acre lots be the minimum lot size.
I guess my question might be for John then. John, do we, and I'll clarify, I don't have a problem doing this. What I don't want to do though is paint ourselves into a corner where everyone that owns land there in the HP3 zone comes back and says, well, you changed it to HP2 here and then you did it again here and maybe again here, and so you got to do it for me. John, what's your legal thought on that?
So just because the council rezones one piece of property in a way that they feel best suits the proposed development or the proposed treatment of that zone doesn't mean neighboring property are entitled to that same treatment. And I think this type of a conversation about that slippery slope is one that councils have quite regularly because of that concern. But I think that, relying on the hillside protection plan, as well as just looking at it at each parcel as its own parcel, as opposed to thinking of it as a change across the entire hillside, is a good approach. But I also think that looking at it from is this going to slippery slope down into everything becomes HP1 or HP2 or 12, so anyways, I think it's good questions to ask. You're not legally obligated to a future zone change. Obviously people can ask for it, but there's nothing that would force the council's hand in a future discussion.
John, isn't there something unique about this, that the proposed subdivision is in 2 separate zones right now? Am I understanding that right?
So our zoning code basically says we like zoning designations to follow property lines.
Right, this one doesn't, right?
Right, because it follows that pressure zone. And
Right.
so I think that the council could, that could be the justification for this change, if the council was so inclined. But I don't think you're obligating yourself to something by approving this. You're not going to obligate yourself to a future approval without taking that approval strictly on the merits, if that makes sense.
Thank you, John.
I think we kind of had this same issue too, and I think it's a good thing to point out, Councilman Swanson, when we rezone those 3 lots up on 2100, with the thing that we talk about adjacent property having the same zoning. We just did that rezone from RE20 to R 12.5. I think that was the same question. Are we setting a precedent? I think there is a uniqueness here that this property line is divided into 2 different zones. So, but I think your comment is something we do need to keep in mind in the spirit of it might not be legally obligated, but morally obligation and consistency is something we always need to think about.
Well, and in the spirit of transparency too, I think it's important that we ask the question, because what we're doing is taking a piece of property that's in 2 different zones and taking those 2 zones and making it a 3rd zone. So we're not taking this piece and making it all R110 or all HP3, which would make it all contiguous, the same zone along property lines. We're taking this and changing those 2 zones into a 3rd zone. And I just, want to make sure that we don't paint ourselves in a corner, and it sounds like we haven't, and I'm good.
Mayor, one other comment, and that is the HP3 zone requires a 2-acre lot. The HP2 requires 12,000 and the R110 is 10,000. So in a sense, some of this is actually being downzoned and some of it's being upzoned. Further, the property to the east, if you look about that one line that's on the east where the red is, all that property to the east, there are some very significant hazards that are to that east on those east properties, and they definitely have some constraints there that I think we would definitely be looking long and hard before any future zone changes on those properties.
Okay. And once, just thinking out loud, this doesn't really go against the fact of what we've talked about with the general plan committee in regards to rezoning. I think this fits into the map that they're working on too, as you stated earlier, Rob. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the council? Eric, do you have any other comments you'd like to add before we seek a motion?
Just as I was talking about before, mentioning in the entirety of the map. Now, I don't own the property above what I'm rezoning, but in consistency, the thought is that HP2 zone comes straight down, and that easterly border be that border of the HP2 zone. Really, like I had mentioned before, the HP2 zone was created when we did the Cove and our last phase of North Oaks Cove. And so that ground was rezoned as the development happened. And then it was kind of like, oh, everything else just got put into the stuff to the west was higher density and the stuff to the east was lower. But that's kind of the thought as far as, addressing Councilman Swanson's looking at the map. Ideally, we draw that hard line on the east border of this property, continuing up along with the Cove is that HP2 designation line.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or discussion, council, before we seek a action on this to rezone the property? Okay, the ordinance number on this would be 2021-06. 2021-06. So with that ordinance number in mind, do we have a motion to rezone land located at approximately 3575 north, 950 east from residential R110 and Hillside HP3 to Hillside HP2? Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I'll move that we approve ordinance 2021-06 as you described.
All right. Councilmember Swanson has made a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Have a second from Councilmember Severing. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Stoker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2021-06 is passed unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 9. The presenter this evening will be our finance director, Evan Nelson. We will have a public hearing on this. But first of all, maybe Evan, you could give us some insight so that as we open the public hearing, people can make comments regarding what the proposal will be. So Evan?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have this item here, a proposal to amend our current year budget. This is a continuation of John's presentation from the last council meeting. We talked in fairly high-level terms last time, and today we're bringing to you the details of that proposal, as well as an ordinance to allow you to approve the proposed amendments as desired. In the packet, we've included a detailed revised budget so you can see all of the general ledger accounts that are being changed. There's also a document that shows those changes with a bit of notes. And then I have
Hey, Evan, could you go through all those lines one by one? Just kidding, just kidding.
I can do whatever you want, Mayor.
No, just give us the Reader's Digest view.
Right. Well, I'll kind of review the staff report and then we'll see if there are any questions and we can go as deep as you want. So as you're aware, during the budget preparation, we had some concerns about our revenues for fiscal year 21 due to COVID-19. And we made significant cuts to the fiscal year budget, including wage adjustments that would typically have been included. And so a big part of this proposal is to restore wage adjustments that had originally been cut from the budget. That's part of this. There are also some market adjustments and some changes with new positions, including a new full-time police officer, a new city recorder, moving the planning director to full-time status rather than part-time. John kind of went through some more detail about this last meeting, but the cost, as we put all these together, the cost across all departments is $157,504 in the current fiscal year. And then our estimate of these costs extending into future fiscal years is that we're making a commitment of $374,000. So it's a fair amount of money, but we wanted to make sure you're aware of what those costs are expected to be.
And council, just, I know that 157 is not a number you saw last week. That's because that's the combination of a couple of those lines last week with the new officer, with the planning director. So anyways, just so it's clear that you didn't hear that 157 last time, it's because Evan, as he was doing this, had to add those together to reach the 157.
Right. The next part of this are some proposals from the Parks Department. $10,000 being restored to the budget for building maintenance, forestry and tree removal, and playground maintenance. The next part of this is the building department has been reviewing some different software options that would help the permitting process. And they've zeroed in on their preferred option, And the cost of that is estimated at $20,000 in the current fiscal year. And I think that's intended to help the process be smoother for staff as well as for developers who are involved in building permits.
And I believe that accomplishes two things. It helps us better serve our customers, but also there's an offset to that long term with reduced labor, is my understanding. Is that correct?
I believe there is, John.
Yes, the cities that we've talked to who have implemented this type of software have found that their need to take phone calls and schedule appointments has dropped in a way that allowed for a reduction in hours by employees.
And I know, John, you've made an estimate on that. It's simply an estimate, but I think as we look long term, it does two things. It reduces our labor costs, which are only going to get more expensive, in addition to finding, continue to find qualified people. So I believe this solves a couple problems with potential labor shortages and better service to the customer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the estimate would, on an ongoing basis, would substantially offset the ongoing cost of the software, if our discussions stick in my memory correctly.
That's correct. And part of this 20,000 includes a one-time hardware purchase, some little bit bigger monitors and some things so that the plans can be reviewed electronically. So you are correct, Mayor.
And I believe there's a hope that this software would in the future be utilized for other planning applications besides just building permits. So there's some potential there. The next section we're talking about is the police department. So I mentioned the proposal for a new full-time police officer. And then going along with that, there's a need for a new vehicle for that officer, as well as equipment and the vehicle equipment that goes with that. And then the other proposal or part of that is replacing two of our existing police vehicles. And those were eliminated from the budget proposal last year when we were needing to cut things. And then there's also replacing several laptops in the police department that's included there. In the original budget approved by the council, we had included $360,000 in rainy day funds that we were utilizing to balance the budget. And we've amended some of that and reduced it prior to tonight. And tonight we're proposing to eliminate the rest of the use of rainy day funds in the budget. And that's being supplemented with the increase in sales tax that we've been seeing. So we're proposing $501,826 be added to our sales tax revenue estimate. We're already almost to that level, just being halfway through, or I guess not even halfway through the fiscal year as far as our sales tax revenues go. So I think we're comfortable recommending that with an expectation that our sales tax revenues will exceed that $501,000 surplus amount. In the detail of the budget, you'll notice there is still some money left in that use of fund balance or rainy day account. And that amount is what we had rolled forward from the previous budget to pay for the code update. So we have eliminated the amount of the rainy day to support the operating budget, but we left that, I think, 98,000 or so in order to pay for the code update that had been budgeted in the previous fiscal year. The last part on this staff report is the CARES Act. We're just shifting which general ledger account we're using to track the CARES Act funding so that it's tracked as an intergovernmental revenue. So you'll see that one revenue account is decreasing and another is increasing by the same amount, which is a pretty minor adjustment there. So that's the Reader's Digest version, Mayor. We can answer any questions or go into more detail if you would like.
Evan, just a question, since you're our Director of Finance, and I'd like Councilmember Swanson to render his opinion also, since this is his assignment as a council member, as a liaison to the finance of the city. Do you see anything in here that is not a need versus a want? And the reason I asked that question, and we've had numerous discussions on this, but I value you and Councilmember Swanson's opinion on this, because I think we have to keep in mind that as we continue to discuss the public safety building, we want to reduce the burden on our citizens with a potential property tax increase by using excess revenues that we may have in the operation of the city now. So I think we've got to be careful not just to use up all the money we're getting, looking longer term, trying to have excess revenues to help a bond payment if we, when we move forward on the public safety building. So I think we still have to be careful about concentrating on our needs versus our wants. So I'd like to hear your opinion if you see anything in the budget that you think is more of a want than a need.
Am I going first?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, you're all aware that personnel costs are really the greatest expense when it comes to funding our city operations. And the mayor and council have made a pretty significant push over the past few years to make sure that our employees are fairly compensated. Those are costs, when you make these decisions, those are costs that are a long-term commitment, because it's not very often that we reduce the number of employees as the city grows. So whether that's a need or a want, it seems to me that maintaining competitive wages, market-based wages for employees is necessary in order to maintain a workforce that can meet the needs of a growing city. So when we talk about adding positions, those are significant expenses and significant commitments that we're making. I'll mention the planning director in particular. You might wonder, is that a need to have the planning director be full-time versus part-time, or is that a want? From my perspective, I feel like the city is at a critical point of development right now. We're seeing a lot of growth, a lot of development applications, and the way that our city develops over the next 10 or 15 years is going to determine our revenue structure for the perpetual future. And so I feel like having somebody in that position that can put a lot of attention toward planning and development is going to be a wise thing for the city to do, a wise investment, so that that development can have the attention and focus and expertise that the city really needs to have as we're deciding what the city is going to be like into the future. I feel like our current planning director, Rob Scott, has really done a wonderful job, and he's provided great counsel and support and expertise. And I think he set us up really well to move to the next level. But I think our city is at a point where we need to invest more into that. So I think that's good. The police department, I'm not tied as closely to the police to be fully aware of what the needs are there. I know that public safety is a very high priority to the city council, And so I know the mayor and John and the chief have worked closely to discuss this proposal. And so I'm trusting your judgment on that because I haven't really been involved in the details of that proposal. So yes, I would say that these are needs for the city as we look to the long-term future of the city.
Thank you, Evan. I think that's how we have to look at it, is investing in our future. Planning, we've used the term planning for growth before, but I think I've changed my mind to planning for quality of life for the residents of our city. And I look at these things being a good portion of an infrastructure, not the hard infrastructure, but I'd call it soft infrastructure, where we have to outpace growth. And you've heard me say many times, I think the number one priority for government is the safety of its citizens. So with the police, we've got to be ahead of the growth there. And as I said last week, you'll see in the salary things that we have really put some focus, not on just being fair and equitable and making an investment in all of our city employees, but we know the pressure on police officers and growth. So we've made some adjustments there to focus on the safety of our city. So let's go to Councilmember Swanson. I know he's been engaged in a lot of discussions on what we can do to make sure we're balancing wants and needs and that we're making the proper investments. So Councilman Swanson, what are your comments on the proposed adjustments?
I don't have any. I think all of our these proposed adjustments fit well within the needs versus a want. I think more than anything, these adjustments represent the near culmination of a change in strategy for the city. We've been a reactive city, as most cities are, for a very long time. And as small cities are better able to be in a reactive kind of situation because there isn't anything really large or crazy that ever really happens. As we grow, we're changing from that. And over the last, probably 3 or 4 years, we've been moving more towards a proactive strategy versus a reactive strategy. And Mayor, you've really kind of taken us and accelerated that transition over this last year, and it's been really good for us. I look at our public safety, both our police and our fire, and they always take a proactive stance. You know, you'll see more engines at a fire than probably is needed, just in case. And officers don't wait for something terrible to happen. They act proactively. And we're doing that as a council with our finances now. As far as our employees go, we've also changed that strategy to an attract and retain strategy versus a maintain strategy. And that attract and retain strategy requires forward thinking. And initially, it can be a little more expensive because it's a recognition that it's much more expensive to lose good employees and replace them than it is to pay them market value and encourage them to be a long-standing part of our team. So I'm grateful for the new strategy, the change in strategy. I think it's necessary for us moving forward. And I'll also point out that while we are increasing our sales tax proposed revenue by $501,000, as Evan mentioned, we virtually already are over by that much. And we're not even halfway through the year. So we're not even thinking about spending the additional sales tax revenue overages that may come through the rest of the year. We're simply looking at what's already happened and making those adjustments from there. I think it's a good policy.
Thank you for your comments. And one thing we've had internal discussion on, to be cautious as we move forward, because it's interesting to see the effect the pandemic has had on sales tax growth, particularly in our city and other cities our size. I believe as things start going back to normal, it may be a little bit dangerous to count on that as a continuation, although we hope it would be, because it would lighten the burden of some of the things in our city. I would also point out that this is not a restoration of all things, so to speak, in regards to things that were taken out of the budget initially. And there may not ultimately be a restoration of everything in the budget. We'll just take it a step at a time. So thank you for your comments. Any other comments from council before we, or questions before we enter into a public hearing? Any other comments from other council members? All right, then I'd like to, at this point in time, open a public hearing to discuss the proposed budget amendments for the fiscal year 2020 and 2021.
Mayor, Chief Quinney has a comment.
All right, Chief Quinney.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk, not just tonight, but over the last several months, if not years, about the growth in the city. And with the growth comes increased traffic. And there was a conversation tonight about an intersection where there's some concern. We had a conversation earlier this morning in staff meeting about another concern with the retirement of Officer Orm in December. He was our dedicated traffic officer, and he did a great job. I met with my lieutenants and my sergeants, and we decided that in the interest of how we can best serve the public and keep our officers safe, we had to absorb that position back into patrol. I will not put an officer on a traffic detail and leave another officer alone on a domestic violence or another dangerous situation. So with that said, this additional officer will help us with those traffic situations. But I still think we need more. And traffic is a huge concern, and I don't want to minimize it. It's a huge concern for me. But again, I won't put officers in danger because I'm assigning somebody to traffic where they can't or aren't able to be out on some other higher priority stuff. And again, traffic is not a low priority for me. We definitely want to make sure people get and go to where they want to go and come from where they're coming safely. So this additional officer will definitely contribute to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I would just add that when we talk about keeping our citizens safe, all these officers in our city, although they don't reside here, are our citizens, and we need to keep them safe. Just another piece of color to Chief Quinney's comments. As part of our due diligence, which we take very seriously as the council, in having discussion with other law enforcement folks, I asked the question, what is the number one thing in your mind that keeps our city safe? Without hesitation, this individual indicated it was visual presence in the city. And that's what keeps criminals aware of the fact that they don't want to come into our city. So with that said, I think Chief Quinney has a good point of safety, but also having the presence on the streets when necessary is also important for the safety of our residents. All right, do we have any other comments from the public in regards to our public hearing?
Mayor, there aren't any at this time.
I see something in chat. We check that.
We actually just had a question pop up. It's Randall Wynn.
And I think I saw another one come through also. Is Randy's comment in chat, or does he want to make a verbal comment?
He has a verbal comment.
Okay, well, while he's making his verbal comment, would you check the comment in chat for us?
Yeah, so Megan says, are red light cameras an option? I have seen them in other states and have seen the cars not run red lights. It seems every day I see at least 2 to 3 cars run red lights. If we aren't giving the law enforcement as many officers as they are wanting or needing, I feel like a robot is just as good as, and we will pay for itself over time.
Okay, thank you, Megan, for your comment. Do we want to allow Mr. Nguyen now to make his comment? Randy, if you'd state your name and address, please.
Am I being heard now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Randall Wynn, 2412 Barker Parkway. I just, as a citizen, I wanted to support the discussion that's just taken place and support the budget changes. I think, as many of you said, I think that it's a wise move. So just a public comment of that support.
Thank you.
Mayor, we have Robert Bollar who would like to make a comment.
Yes, Robert Buller, would you please state your full name and address, please?
Sure. Yeah, it's Robert Bowler, 684 East, 2900 North in North Ogden. I just want to say that I'm fully in support of the additional resources that you're giving our police department. I know Officer Orem will be missed. He was very good at traffic. And I just think that that traffic enforcement element is crucial. It's that visual presence, and also it just helps the, I don't know how to say it best, but those that, it was said earlier, those that want to come into our city and commit a crime, when you have traffic being stopped, they're going to think twice about it. Because if they have a tail light out or headlight out, or even their license plate, you know, there are multiple reasons they can be pulled over. And I just really appreciate our officers and all that they do. And our family has been the recipient of some tickets. But nonetheless, that's a small price to pay for all that they do in the enforcement of traffic in our city.
Thank you for your comments. Katie, do you have anyone else?
Not at this time, Mayor.
Okay, we'll just wait just a second or two. This is an important issue. See if we have any other comments. Okay, seeing none, I would look for a motion to close the public hearing. Do we have a motion?
Hey, Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Barker.
I'll make a motion. We close the public hearing.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Was that you, Councilmember Severing?
Yes, I second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor of closing the public hearing? Say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
objections? Okay, thank you very much. So at this point in time, after closing the public hearing, we need to have a discussion on action to consider an ordinance on the proposed budget amendments for the fiscal year 2021. That ordinance would be 20-21-07. Do we have a motion to adopt the proposed budget amendments?
Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Stoker.
I will make the motion that we accept the amendments that have been made and as stated by Evan, and the ordinance number was it 2021-07?
Yes, ma'am. 2021-07, yes.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have
I'll
a
second.
Have a second by Councilmember Swanson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote on this. Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Stoker,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
and Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you, Evan, John, and the staff for your preparation and discussion on that very important issue. We'll now move on to item number 10 on our agenda, which would be council reports. And we'll start with Council Member Barker in regards to building and planning.
I have John gonna pull up a couple maps from can talk about the general plan steering committee for a minute. They wanted to send the map of how things are going right now and see if there's any other direction the council wants them to go. In this upcoming meeting this month, while John's pulling that up, we are going to be talking about the green area, which is where they want to put conservation easements or conservation zones. And we're going to discuss what type of conservation zone and easement that entails, whether we're going to sell development rights to different parts of the city, or just like we did on Barker Park, where the city will donate the development rights to a state agency. There's a lot of different options. So we're going to go through that this coming week or this coming month. As you can look at the map, the whole wide area, that's going to stay the same zone as it already is. We got the yellow's pretty much all the same as it already is. And we're trying to kind of just refine this map. Are there any questions or concerns about what you're seeing or what you'd like the general plan steering committee to focus on?
Ryan,
Yes.
how big is that green area that you're looking at? How many acres is that?
A lot.
Or it looks like a lot.
I don't have the exact number, but if we remember, there's been a proposal, or I don't know if it's a proposal yet. We've been presented a plan going north of the cove that's 250 acres, and that would be included in this. And that's just a small portion of everything that's in that green area. So it's a big area.
That seems like an awful lot to put.
Of course, that's the face of Ben Lomond, basically, right?
Yep, the bench and hillside, yeah.
Bench in the hillside up there.
Yep.
And just so you know, the general plan steering committee is part of their conversation is what type of conservation. And that's something they haven't decided yet. Because, for example, conservation down, in other areas we've talked about, there'd still be agriculture on it. But in this area, they haven't really defined, is it wilderness? Is it cluster homes? Is it golf courses? What is it? So.
Yep.
Its intent is to conserve as much of the beauty of the foothills and the face of that mountain as we can by being fair and equitable. Any other comments, Councilman Swanson? I see you unmuted.
I think I'd advise the steering committee to also remember that almost all of that land, and it's about 400 to 500 acres that's in that proposed conservation area, resides in the county. And unless we annex it, we have zero say over what is conserved, what is developed. As it's drawn now, it goes just north of Nebo, which is the existing cove. So everything that has been, the ideas that have been thrown to us by Randy Marriott and his attorney, existing land that the Hall family owns over by the mouth of the canyon, all of that is in county. And if they don't ask for annexation, they can go to the county for development, and it's not what they would want, but they can develop. I think it's 1 per 40,000 square feet kind of thing. So just a reminder that we can't just flat out conserve and make that wilderness area. It's not in our control to do that, even if we wanted to.
Good point. I'll make sure and bring that up. I know there are some members of the committee on here this meeting listening as well, so we'll make sure to bring that up at our meeting this month.
Also, Ryan, it's been brought to my attention, what is the definition of steering? Does anybody know? I mean, I've heard some different things that it has to do with I don't know how to explain it, other than it's that we possibly could open ourselves up for some questioning on the word steering because it implies some racism or prejudice. It's from what I've been told and researched, it's not a very good word. So I wonder if that's the case, and maybe John can answer this even more, that we change it maybe to advisory, however, can't say that word right, committee rather than steering. Just a thought.
I'm okay with that. I'm gonna leave that decision to John and the mayor, but I'm in agreement. If there's any connotation, I think we should change it, but so I'll take this, we'll go back. They're getting pretty close at bringing this map back with what we're proposing. Make a recommendation on, then the next step I think would be going and vesting this general plan vesting this into our general plan, if I am correct, John?
Yes, that's correct. The goal is to further refine the map so it can be vested.
Okay,
Councilman
Councilman
Barker?
Barker?
Yes.
Councilman Severing?
Well, I was just going to say two things really, really quick. First off, in the real estate world, steering is a negative connotation. It can actually smack of violating some of the federal fair housing regulations. So it might be a good idea to look at that again, look at that idea. And then second, it might be something worth, I heard recently from an individual who's in the county, they were proposing a project and the county told him that if it exceeded $750,000 in the project, that they weren't gonna deal with it. They were just gonna have this person actually, what's the word? When you change it into city versus county, what's the word, you know, right?
Annexation.
Annexation.
That it had to be annexed into the city. So that might be something, I love what Councilman Swanson said. Maybe that would be something to look at to find out the truthfulness of that.
I have had a discussion with the county. Councilman Swanson is right on that the development is much more limited with 1 unit per 40,500, or I think 40,520 feet or something of that nature. I don't believe the county is interested in developing those size of projects and taking responsibility for everything in that nature, but the county has to speak for themselves. But I think you're right, Councilman Severing, they're really not interested in large developments like that being on county land. They're not, I think, prepared to provide services and things of that nature, but that surely would be a decision of the county. But the density is much, much, much less than could be done if the city annexed it in, so.
Just mentioned it is a possibility though, in our neighboring city up on the hillside there, the developer didn't like what the city was requiring and they did develop it in the county. So it's always an option. And again, it was a small project, but.
Yeah, I think the county's kind of changed their direction a little bit on large development since that time, so. Okay, anything else, Councilman Barker?
No, that's all I've got for tonight.
I would just quickly add that one of the bills that's concerning to me that's in the House right now that it's attached to affordable housing is internal auxiliary dwelling units. And if you think, if the demand got really heavy for those and people have the rights in their property to utilize that, but think about if that really catches on, the number of additional people that could move in to the city you think traffic is bad now and you look at parking, there are some additional burdens, infrastructure-wise and cost-wise, that would be placed upon cities without any offsetting revenue, because a house may not be worth more money just because someone's living in the basement. So that bill is being attached along with other things to affordable housing. I heard a comment made by a legislature that he believes that one of the added costs to construction is permitting and delayed inspections, which I kind of had to smile at, because if you look at the profit of the developer and the general contractor, it's pretty much peanuts to a delayed inspection or a delay in permitting. But those things are moving through the legislature pretty quickly. So just a heads up. So thank you for your report, Councilman Barker. We'll now move on to see if Councilman Swanson has anything he'd like to report on this evening.
I don't have a lot to add from the finance standpoint, other than to report that, again, sales tax continues to be above projections. That is a trend that continues. John and I and Evan have begun meeting in advance of the detailed and the real serious budgeting that we're about to get into, looking at departments across the city and going through everything with a fine-tooth comb and looking at efficiencies and just making sure that we've turned every stone that we possibly can, and making sure that we are using taxpayer money in the most efficient way possible without being overly restrictive in redundancies and things like that for support in staff and things like that. So that's an ongoing project that John and I and Evan are working on, and we'll continue to work on that and hopefully have some recommendations for council as we get closer to actual sitting down in our budget sessions and going with that.
Just one quick report. Could you give the council an update on where we're at with our audit, Bill, since it's past due substantially?
The last report that I have is that we are close to having that finalized. Evan, are you still online with us?
He is. Let me bring him over so he can.
Okay.
Just a second.
You just too allowed to talk. Yeah.
Mayor, I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go into about where we are and all of that at this point, or if you want to save that for when we do the actual audit report.
I think probably waiting to have the report to the audit committee, then you as and I believe there's some discussion about the recorder by statute being a member of that committee, but I think we would have the report from you as the chairperson, because there are going to be some issues that are coming up that are going to be up for discussion that we're going to have to address. But maybe we could just keep it short to the fact of where we're at on the actual audit timing and the last thing we're working on there. Evan?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So we've, as you probably know, we have some new auditors this year, and they've taken a look at things in a different way than our past auditors. So we've had to reevaluate some of our approaches to our accounting. And the last pending item is related to the city's agreement or agreements with Marriott for the development up on the mountainside. And so we're working through some details of those agreements in connection with the amount of money that the city has paid from the beginning of those agreements up to the present time. And so once we resolve that, then we'll be able to finish the audit report. We'll provide a report to the audit committee and then to the city council as well to wrap that up. But as the mayor said, we'll have some recommendations from the auditors, and we'll make some adjustments moving forward so that we can be in better compliance and fulfill our financial stewardship role there.
So bottom line, it looks like we owe the Marriotts some money for non-payment according to the agreement. And I would say, Evan and myself and John had a very informative discussion with the partner from the audit firm. And I would say maybe a different approach would not be totally transparent. I would call it the audit firm's taking a correct approach that probably should have been taken for many years prior. And so I would use the term a correct approach that they're taking. And I think they're very knowledgeable and they'll be very helpful going forward. Would you agree with that, Councilman Swanson?
Right, that was what I was referring to, kind of on the backhand with how much did you want to talk about at this point?
Yeah, I think there'll be some quite a list of, I think, details, but I think generally as Evan indicated, that's the holdup on our audit. The audit was due December 31st. But due to the issues that Evan is diligently working through with the auditors, we do have a delay. I want the council to know that Evan has been in contact with the state auditor's office. They're aware of our delays. We are fully aware of the time frame in which they can quit sending us our sales tax money. And we feel very comfortable that we'll be able to avoid that situation. And so I know the team is working diligently through that, and I think we'll learn a lot. So we will have a full report under the direction of Councilman Swanson. Once we get the audit report, we will invite the auditors in to that meeting to give a full report. So anything else, Councilman Swanson?
No.
Thank you. Staff? Any comments, additions before we adjourn the meeting this evening?
Chief Quinney has a comment.
Go ahead, Chief.
I feel like I've taken up too much time not being on the agenda, but I just want to make council and the public that's listening aware that Detective Paul Rhodes, after 25 years of service with the city, is retiring. His last day will be this Friday. He served a number of positions in the police department, from patrol to school resource officer, detective, and special function supervisor, where he supervises our VIPS team, CERT, and our victim advocate. He's been a great asset to the city, and we really appreciate everything he's done for us. So we're going to miss him.
Thank you, Chief. We will. And he's done a nice job, and he's had some issues health-wise that he's dealing with, and we wish him well as he goes forward. John, Call, do you have any comments this evening?
I do. I have three things. The garbage collection RFP is out for responses right now. It is due on Friday. But we are planning on having a discussion with the council about the future of recycling and what the options are. We'll have some numbers on what recycling will cost, because if the council would like to look at that, we just anticipate we need to make that decision as we decide the provider we're going to select. So that's one item that we will send you an update on between this meeting and next meeting, for a discussion at next meeting. And then on the individuals that we've been working with on the 400 East project, the Washington Boulevard widening, we were able to get a occupancy agreement worked out with them. And so we have the right to construct the project, and it gives everyone a little more breathing room on the resolving the money issues. We did actually end up filing the condemnation action, but that is now being delayed while we work on just these other details. So anyways, just so the council's aware that I think we're getting some good headway there. And then the last thing on the pond property, I've reached out to the individuals who had inquired, most of them would still like a residential component. And so I've talked with them a little bit about that. And what I think the council might be okay with as far as that, the approach of the sale of that property. But so far, none of them have renewed their interest in purchasing the ground, but I am still waiting to hear back from at least one of them. So.
Okay. Anything else, John?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, any other comments from council?
Mayor, I do have one question.
Okay.
It's for Public Works. There's been a discussion on Facebook. Public Works sent out a Facebook post talking about the change in the clearinghouse from one located in Salt Lake City for our checks for people paying their utility bills and such, and that being changed to a Seattle address, and that the forwarding of that will no longer be occurring, and there will not be a waiving of late fees because it gets sent to the wrong place. The question several residents have had is, did we send out an official notification to our residents that that was happening? And if so, what was that official notification?
So I can try and answer that. I'll get us an example, but I believe that the actual mailed out checks include the new mailing address or the bills. So it would not have included the old address for at least the past 12 months. And so that would have been the individual notice mailed to each house that if you're sending in a payment, this is where it should go to.
Okay.
So I think the people most likely to have some conflicts are those who set up automatic billing and haven't, gone into their bank. Sorry, not automatic billing, but a bank bill pay, where they go in and click a button and the bank sends a check. If they didn't update the address there because they didn't realize that the bill updated the address, then those would be the payments that would most likely be late because they had never updated the address, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. All right. That answers my question. And then one last comment on Senate Bill 98. That's the one in which Senator Dan McKay would like to enable developers to hire their own inspectors to not only do inspections, but to issue certificates of occupancy for homes and multiple dwelling units. I don't know about you guys, but I have a real big heartburn with a developer being able to hire their own inspectors to determine whether or not they're following our codes. So that's got to be fought. Call your legislators. It'll have to get through the Senate and then get through the House and then get past Governor Cox. But we need to do all that we can to fight this.
Yeah, that takes away protection for the consumer.
Absolutely.
You get that maybe 1 year home guarantee. But I think the key to this is twofold: lost revenues and an independent look to protect the consumer. So I agree with Councilman Swanson that I think the Utah League is on this, but continued correspondence with our representatives would be important because there's a lot of legislators that have real estate involvement. So we just want to make sure that we help them see the other side. So, okay. All right. Well, thank you. Anything else? If not, I would look for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Sorry, Mayor. We still have public comment.
Oh, we do.
We went past public comments, I think.
We did, yeah.
Didn't we? Maybe not, but okay, so 2 times tonight. I've messed up. Any public comments?
Mayor, we have a couple of comments. The first one from Randall Wynn.
Okay, let's hear from Randall. Sorry.
Okay, Randall Wynn, 2412 Barker Parkway. And I'd like to speak to item 7, the intersection at 2600 and 1050. I would be opposed to a roundabout for several reasons. One, I think they are hard to negotiate, and I think that they would cause a safety hazard in and of themselves. That's been my experience with them and seeing others with them. The other thing is I hate to restrict, I hate to put stop signs where it's not absolutely necessary. And so I don't mind the stop signs on the side roads. I use this all the time as well. But to restrict 2600 north and east and west, I would hate to see that. And if we do it, I think the step would be to put a stoplight in, which has been pointed out is more than half the expense, less than half the expense of a roundabout. And it also doesn't involve taking the rest of that property that was involved with it, which Councilman Severin was concerned about. I agree with that. So and my personal experience, unlike Charlotte's, has been that I've noticed people being very courteous there as we make turns. I have not seen unsafe situations. I can't remember one time of seeing unsafe situations. So as Chief Quinney pointed out, I don't think we want to exaggerate the danger of this. Chief Quinney says it's not an accident-prone place, and I agree with that. So let's not jump too quickly. Would be my comment. Let's and when we do, let's put a stop light in there, which would allow the traffic on 2600 east and west to have most of the time as green, and only when somebody comes up to that light. The main concern, the main traffic is in the evening coming home when they all want to turn left on there. And of course, if you put it on a roundabout, then you just concentrate that in there. So everybody's got to join into the same fray. Whereas now they just get in the left turn lane and they can turn left, and it doesn't restrict the rest. Anyway, I've been thinking about this during the meeting and have developed a strong opinion about that against a roundabout and for a stoplight eventually, and let's don't restrict east and west with a stop sign unless we absolutely have to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Katie, do we have other comments?
We do. We have a comment from Robert Bullard.
Okay, Robert.
Hey, twice in one night. I apologize.
Can you give us your address again?
Sure. Robert Bullard, 684 East, 2900 North. I would support what Cheryl was saying about the steering, the language of the steering committee. As Blake said, in real estate, it really is a big deal. And I think even more so in this context, it shouldn't be used, okay? Because I'll let you research it on your own dime. But long story short, there really is a negative connotation. And especially when you're planning a city and you're talking about building blocks and areas and designating zones in a city, I really think that word steering should come out. That's spot on. And advisory is a great suggestion to that. One other thing, and I'll let you go. Is there any chance of printing the mayor's message on the back of the water statement? Because that's just a blank piece of paper. It's going to every household in the city. And I think you're sharing some valuable insights with our residents, and it seems like it would be a great use of that paper. That's all.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
We have one more comment, Mayor. Dallin Barker.
All right, Dallin, would you state your name and address for us, please?
Yeah, Dallin Barker, 3347 North, 500 East. And I'm sorry, I missed last week's meeting, but I just had a comment about the police station and all of that stuff. If that's okay. I know it's late news, but I just see that the existing public safety building is to be demoed. And I feel like with it already being 5,800 square feet, it's close to the court and training functions area of 6,500 square feet. And just doing the math on that and the numbers that they provided, that's roughly $2 million for a court and training functions. I feel like we might be able to renovate the existing building for cheaper than $2 million. That's all I had.
Thank you, Dallin.
No other comments at this time, Mayor.
Okay. Just a reminder, there will be a frequently asked questions document being published that addresses some of the issues that have come up, and we're still open for additional questions, so that'll be coming out soon. Okay. Now, Councilmember Stoker, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
Still, motion to adjourn.
Okay. Let's see, who would be interested in making a second there? Councilman Swanson?
I'll second. I'll take
All
it.
right, we have a motion and a
Thanks,
second.
Ryan.
Does anyone object to adjourning this meeting? Thank you for your service this evening and have a great evening.